Hey everyone, it is George Couros. Welcome back to another solo episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast. One of the things I was thinking about today was all the conversations about change. And this is something that has been forever in education. And there's a really distinct conversation that I remember having. It's probably about 32, 33 years old, and just fell onto social media, started really connecting with some really brilliant minds in education that were talking about how things needed to change and what we needed to do to create something better, not only for our students, but for teachers as well. I think a lot of times we talk about this incredible experience that we want to create for students, but we don't talk about the staff and how they serve them. And if you can't really change the experience for kids, if you don't change the experience for adults. So I was really getting into this and having this conversation about how I wanted things to change. We were sitting at this group at a conference, and there's a gentleman who's probably in his late 60s listening to all of this. And he was just kind of shaking his head and rolling his eyes. And my first inclination was that he was just kind of like, no, why would we change this, right? This is something that we've done forever. We found success in the past. Why can't we do it in the future? And so he finally spoke up and he said, we've been having this conversation my entire career. And it was really interesting to me that he had said that, because I had thought basically we were the first generation ever to talk about how things needed to improve in education. But it is actually way before us, and it's way after. And I'm the old guy now. Like, I'm that guy sitting there, maybe rolling my eyes a little bit. And I don't think all change is necessary. I think there's a lot of things in education that are really, really important. One of the things that I think is really matters to me is kids have the ability to read and write. I don't care if you can do voice to text. I don't care if you have access to all of this AI, all of these things. The ability to read and write really is crucial. Basic numeracy skills, things like that are really important. They were in the past and they will be in the future. But we got to continuously evolve and grow in our learning, especially with all the different opportunities in the world. And so I wrote an email talking about how do we actually create an emotional connection to change, that we don't just talk about change, but people actually feel invested in the process. And one of the stories I shared in the email was about Coke, not Coca-Cola. I should have said that way better. I was talking about Coca-Cola, and this is going to date me a little bit, but I remember very distinctly Coca-Cola had actually decided they were going to do a new version of Coke, something that had, continued success forever and ever. And all of a sudden they want to go to this new version. And, as a kid, having access to the internet, all of these, these strands of information that we have access to now, I remember specifically how people were outraged about the idea of changing this tried and tested formula over the years and how people loved it to this new version. And so why would they do this? And it wasn't until years later that I actually read an article from the history.com website that talked about what actually had happened during that time. And basically what had happened was they taste tested it with over like 190,000 people, and overwhelmingly people wanted the new version. They liked it way better than the old version. And so they just kind of thought it was a slam dunk. And this is actually one of the things that really stuck out to me was it had nothing to do with what was better. It's what people were comfortable with, what they knew. They knew what the old version tasted like. And this actually, in the article, it shared this. All the time and money and skill poured into consumer research on the new Coca-Cola could not measure or reveal the deep and abiding emotional attachment to original Coca-Cola felt by so many people. And so as I wrote in the email, something being better than what was in the past is actually not sufficient to get people to embrace change. They have to have an investment into it. They have to see an emotional connection to why we would actually change in the first place. So I shared just 3 ideas in my email, and you can see it linked down below if you want to read as well. And I'll talk about each one and just kind of like what I remember. I'll read a little bit of it too, but just kind of give you some insights. And the first one is I talked about the idea of creating a shared vision. In the book, The AI-Driven Leader by Jeff Woods, one of my favorite quotes from it really stuck out to me is that authorship is ownership. And so this idea that when you actually are part of creating something as a community, as an organization, then you are more likely to want it to succeed. When you see a school or a district making a mission or vision, there's two ways you can go about it. There's one where you can have like the superintendents, there's the cabinet team or whatever you want to call it, the leadership team, whatever. They kind of go into a back room, hide behind there. And I don't think this happens as much as it used to. And they just basically decide, here is the vision that we are going to do as a school community. And nobody cares because I had no insight in that. And one of the things that I really appreciate is so many schools and districts, and I was a part of this too, they actually bring together community members. They bring together students. They bring together faculty. And they get input on what they're trying to achieve together. And when you actually see your words in that mission and vision, you want it to succeed. You don't want anyone in the community crapping on the thing that the school or district is doing because you actually had input on it. And you obviously can't bring anybody. There's different ways you can get insights from other people. And what is really important there is that you are actually taking the feedback. You are actually getting people's words in that process. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's like a little play we do. Like we pretend we're getting your input, but we're going to do what we're going to do anyway. And that's not really how it works. One thing I used to do as an administrator that was really helpful to me was we would try something new in our school community, or we were like thinking about doing something new. So I would actually bring in like our board chair from our parent council. And I would also talk to some teachers and I would say, hey, what do you think of this? Give me some of your feedback. You know what? I really like this, but I really struggle with this. I'm having an issue with this. This is something I'm really struggling with. I'll say, okay, give me a week or two. And then I want to talk to you again. So then I'd go back to the drawing board, eliminate some stuff, actually, add some stuff based on that feedback. And then I bring them back and all of a sudden they loved it. Why do they love it? Because their name's all over it. And so when you feel that you've created it, you are more likely to want it to succeed. So again, creating that shared vision, and it has to be truly shared. It's not bringing people together so you can do what you want to do. It's bringing people together to create something and implement something together. The second one I talk about is to tell and co-create your story. And I wrote this in Innovate Inside the Box, and it's this. If you want to help people embrace a new narrative, the best way is to create that new narrative together. What is the story of your classroom, school, organization? Not just the story of the past, but what is the story you will write together in the future? People are more likely to connect with the story if they can visualize it in themselves. And so one of the things that when I talk about this is you look in your own community, you talk about all of the things that you want to happen, as a school or a district, as an organization. But the reality is all of those things already exist in your organization. And so it's really kind of telling the stories. A lot of times the amazing things that you want to happen in one classroom are happening across the hallway. And so when you have the ability to tell and share that story, do you actually encourage people to share it so that people know this is actually possible within the context of what we're already doing? Like, this is why I wrote about this in Innovate Inside the Box. And I remember when I was a principal, one of the things that was said to me when I took that role, that role, you are going to be so much better of a teacher now because you get the best PD. Other teachers want more than anything. You get to see other teachers teach. I was thinking, that is true. So because my flexibility, the ability to walk around, go into classrooms, be in there like literally every day, which is something I did everything I could to be in like every classroom, every single day, even for a few seconds. And what I started to realize, it didn't really matter if I became a better teacher when I was a principal, if I'm never going to teach again. So what I started to focus on was, how can I use my flexibility to actually help make some of the great ideas happening? And I would actually go into a classroom and I would see great things and say, hey, can you just talk about this for a few seconds? And I would do that. And it's like kind of you're creating a space because, teachers would love to do that, but they just don't have the time. So how do you become like the chief storyteller of your organization where you're actually doing this? And this actually leads to the last one, to make current great learning go viral. And in the book, Innovator's Mindset, I actually talked about these what ifs, and I'll give you an example of some of them. What if schools operated as if we should all be learners as opposed to students being the only learners? What if we promoted risk-taking to our staff and students and modeled it openly as administrators? What if everyone in an organization, not just our students, was encouraged to pursue his or her dreams? What if we recognized and built on learners' strengths? What if we empowered students to make a difference in the world today and the future? And so when I talked about those things, it was like, hey, if you could build a school the way you would identify it to be, what are your what ifs? What are those what ifs? And so the part of the process was to actually help people understand that these what ifs are possible. You can actually make them happen right now. Is that, could you not do these things right now? Can you do them within your current context? And in my book, What Makes Great Principal, it's like, as you kind of make these things go viral, saying like, hey, this is already happening, as I talked about earlier, I share this, that people are more likely to take steps forward on a path if they see footprint from others on the ground. As I said earlier, everything that you want to do in your organization currently exists. And you will feel more of an investment into it when you see people in your organization doing this, when you know you have had fingerprints all over your mission, your vision, creating it together. It is when something is done to you that you will fight. When something is done with you, you want to make it come alive together. So I just want to share some of those insights with you. The Coca-Cola story always really resonates with me. And that's something that really stuck with me, because you realize that even if something is better, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be embraced. And I shared this in the email. Any of these ideas does not guarantee that everyone will feel emotional connection to change to create something better in a classroom or school. Nothing will guarantee it, as people will initiate their own change in a way that makes sense to them. The hope is not to change everyone, but to inspire as many possible to pursue something better. That enthusiasm will become contagious, and what seemed impossible today will be a reality sooner than you think. When we say little things like this, it is, the system. Something I always try to recognize, we are the system. People make up the system. The system is not the Wizard of Oz hiding behind a curtain. So yes, there are things outside of our control. I understand that. But there are a lot of things within our control. And you're seeing schools all around the world, public, private, whatever, saying we can do better. And they're finding a way. It's not that they don't understand there's problems. They're just looking for solutions to make the best possible opportunities. And I'm so appreciative, not only as an educator, but as a father, that so many schools do this every single day. So I just want to share some of those insights with you. I hope that helped. Thanks for being here for another solo episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.